In this video, we're going to find out how to reduce noise in Corona renders. And on top of that, we're going to take a look into what creates noise in a scene. And please don't get scared. In this interior, I reproduced the most common mistakes that lead to heavy noise in a render. So first, we need to learn how to identify what causes all that noise. To find out a source of noise in a fast and precise way, you can use a tool called Light Mix. So let's open Render Setup window and let's go to the Scene tab. And first we'll stop Interactive. Now we click Setup Light Mix, select Instance Lights, or you can select Group Lights or Layers, whichever is convenient for you, and then Generate. Now we can restart Interactive, and in Light Mix we can see all the light sources that we have in our scene, and we'll disable them all. We'll examine each lights separately to determine which ones are causing noise. So we can see some strange looking yellow dots on the floor. The background is set up correctly. There can be no doubt about that. I have a dedicated video on background setup. Go ahead and rewatch it if you need to. And let's make a quick recap. If, when setting up background, you're using Corona Light MTL, make sure to disable Emit Light option. There it is. And that will eliminate the noise. Here's the rule that you should stick to. In most cases, when using self-illumination material, you need to turn off Emit Light option. If you choose to enable it, you need to have a clear understanding of why you're doing it. So Emit Light is off, but we still have these dots. And this means that somewhere in the scene, there's another self-illumination material that creates this noise. And I've already found the object that is to blame for that. It's this point light. And so sometimes identifying a noise-producing object can be quite tricky. You have to group all objects in your scene and try to determine which group contains that problematic effect that creates noise. In this scene, it's this point light. It's a 3D light model that has a self-illumination material under ID number 4. And I've said that multiple times, and I'll say it again. Make sure to examine your models before adding them to your scene. If a group model contains self-illumination material, a light source, and so on, you need to get rid of things like that. So let's definitely remove this material and see what that does. And we'll set self-illumination to 0, just in case. So you see, the noise is gone. The rest light source is now noise-free. The second most common source of noise is sun. As strange as it may seem. So here's our sun, and what should we do with it? Well, first and foremost, don't set its multiplier too high. In our scene, we have one sun that illuminates the entire interior. The light gets inside the interior and starts to bounce off and re-reflect, creating noise. And you need to avoid that. To create these secondary bounces of light on the walls, you should use environment light, the sky or HDRI map. The thing about sun is that it should only serve to create light shadow patterns on the walls or on the floor, and that's it. And so, with that said, we decrease the brightness of the sun until the pattern remains clearly visible and is bright enough for us to see. This pattern is the only thing that we need the sun for. So you need to lower its brightness as long as the light-shadow pattern remains well defined. The rest of the interior will grow dim, but that's okay. This way you'll reduce the amount of noise in your scene. Now let's focus on lights that are located inside various objects. Sometimes when they shine through a semi-transparent object, they create noise. And like here, for example, this looks more or less okay, by the way. When setting up lighting, beginning visualizers tend to overdo it with the brightness of artificial lights. And as a result, light gets through the material, this lampshade in this instance, and it scatters multiple times. And then all of those photons start to bounce off the objects inside the interior, trying to illuminate it. And this creates huge amounts of noise. And so, in a situation like this, you should turn off the light source altogether. In a day render, there's no need to turn on lamps anyway. Or you can lower brightness of a light source. But the best way to avoid noise in a situation like this would be to use fake light. Like I've told you in one of the past lessons, one fake light will illuminate the lampshade, and the other will illuminate the interior. Then we have ceiling light, and it creates plenty of noise. If its brightness was higher, it would take forever to get rid of all of that noise. In this case, we need to reduce brightness. And if you have mixed lighting in your scene, you can also use fake lights. Add several fake lights to illuminate the lamp, and then add another fake light that will only illuminate the interior. In that case, light sources won't be put too close to the geometry and won't be trying to re-reflect from it multiple times, creating plenty of noise. This is the only correct way to do that. So let's just turn off the ceiling lamp and the point lamp as well. And finally, environment. If you're using HDRI map, you should be ready that your render will take longer to complete than if you were using Sun Sky model or raw fake. HDRI maps consume a lot of RAM, which slows down your render. And that's because they have a bunch of gradients, color transitions, pixels bright as the sun, pixels that are less bright, and so on. Corona needs a lot of time to render all of that. So to minimize render time, you should use Sun Sky model. And keep in mind that your sun should not be too bright. The rest of the light should be coming from raw fake or sky. So here's one more thing I'd like to draw your attention to. Let's talk about tool curtains. A tool curtain also scatters light and creates additional noise. So try not to block your window with curtains, if possible. If you have heavy curtains on your windows, open them up. And this way, the room will be getting more light and the scene will be rendering faster. It's not a good idea to try and illuminate interior through small gap between closed curtains. It always works like this. The more light gets inside the interior, the faster it renders. I've dedicated a video on tool curtains in which I reveal a little trick. If you go to Object Properties and then check Cast Shadows box, that will reduce render time because the interior will be getting more light. Okay? And so the last thing I'd like to talk about is reflective materials that are used for the floor, the walls, and especially in bathrooms that often have reflective tiles. So this is how you deal with this in Corona. Suppose you have a reflective object with big surface, like a floor, for example, and it has reflections, also known as caustics. And that's when the light falling on a surface is reflected on surrounding objects. Even if you disable caustic effect in the render settings, Corona will still be trying to render those secondary bounces of light. So the only way to fix that is actually to apply the reflective material a tool called Ray Switch. However, if your scene has plenty of objects and reflective objects in particular, identifying all reflective materials can be a little tricky. But luckily for you, we've created a special script that does that automatically. It's called RC Ray Switch, and you'll find it among the additional materials to this course. So this is how it works. you select the biggest reflective surface in the interior. Here, it's the floor. And you just click Add Ray Switch. And this script automatically creates a ray switch material. Let's sample this material with a eyedropper. Here's the base material of the floor. Here's the ray switch material that has been created automatically and was assigned to the floor. Here's non-reflective Corona Legacy MTL, which is linked to the GI slot of ray switch MTL. And now Corona won't be rendering caustics from global illumination, and the scene will have less noise. Also note this, the script takes an average color from the texture map, which means there won't be any visible differences in light and color. And it's a really great tool, which is especially helpful with bathrooms. Select all objects that you have in your bathroom, you apply ray switch, and that's it. It can cut your render time as much as in half. Alright? So these are the basic tips on how to reduce noise in a scene, and I wish you fast and proper renders.